Hello, students, and welcome back to Mr. Sandwich Reads. I am, of course, Mr. Sandwich. Today I'm going to be reading chapter 19 of Donna Napoli's The King of Mulberry Street. When we last left off in chapter 18, Gaetano and Dom had found a place to stay with Signora Esposito, recommended by Grandinetti. Grandinetti said, I know a widow that has space. If you go there, you pay $2 a piece. She'll feed you dinner, and she'll give you a place to lodge, to stay. So they're staying there. They're going to get a dinner every night from Signora Esposito, and they're going to have lunch every day with the sandwiches. So we've seen in just a short amount of time, Dom is starting to get acclimated. That was the word I was going to look for. Dom is starting to get acclimated to his life in the U.S. So let's start. I'm on page 194. This is chapter 19, A Way of Life. I woke up early and staggered in the dark through the apartment door to the bathroom out in the hall. I felt like a king on a throne. Ha! The king of Mulberry Street, doing my business in the right kind of place again. No more hiding behind bushes. The door opened while I was finishing up. What? Who's there? What do you think you're doing here? A man swiped me on the shoulder, knocking me to the floor. My cheek hit something sharp. Get out of here, you ruffian! He kicked me in the side. He grabbed me by the elbow and threw me out in the hall. Help! I screamed. Ow, ow, ow! He pulled me up by the hair and dragged me to the top of the steps. Stop! Signora Esposito came running and blocked the stairwell. Let him go! He was in the bathroom, a hoodlum in our bathroom. That's no hoodlum, that's Dom. Let go. Dom? He's renting a room for me. Dom. And his friend Gaetano. The man let go of my hair. My mistake. He brushed off his hands as though I'd gotten him dirty. Next time, let a person know when there's someone new around. Next time, ask before you beat someone senseless. Signora Esposito took me by the hand and pulled me inside. She roughly washed the cut on my cheek and tisked, Look at that. It doesn't hurt, I lied. It had been a long time since anyone had fussed over me, even gruffly. If she kept it up, I might cry. She took out a bottle of red-brown tincture and smeared it on me. I tensed up, but it didn't even sting. When's the last time you cleaned yourself? I shrugged. Tonight after dinner, take a sponge bath in the kitchen sink. Thank you. I might do that. You will do that, she said. When Gaetano finally woke, he took one look at my face and let out a low whistle. So I told him the whole story, maybe exaggerating a bit for sympathy. I held the darkening bruise on my elbow under his nose. You look terrible. Gaetano looked like he was fighting a smile. He beat you up in the bathroom? That's awful, but he laughed. Then he jumped out of bed and clapped his hands. This is great. This is exactly what we needed. What are you talking about? You'll see. We went to Perano's and bought 10 long sandwiches. He didn't throw in free pastries that day, but he did ask me about my cut. I shrugged. Later, when Grandinetti asked, I told him, some things only friends could understand. Okay, so he considers Grandinetti a friend, but Perano not so much. It's more of a business transaction. It's also worth noting here that back in like old apartment tenements, bathrooms were often common space and shared. That might be sometimes true of kitchens, but obviously Signora Esposito has her own kitchen. Bathrooms definitely could be a shared space, and telephones. I know a lot of the times there was maybe one telephone. My wife has told me stories of her father growing up in Egypt where they really just had one common phone in the apartment, and somebody would have to yell up, hey, phone's for you, or I'll be right back. Let me run up to the third floor and you can use the phone. So not uncommon in these old days with these old apartment tenements that there was common space. There was shared space. Let's see. The mound of sandwiches on the cart was smaller. Where did I leave off? Later, when Grandinetti asked, I told him some things only friends could understand. The mound of sandwiches on the cart was smaller than it had been the day before. But who cared? This was our cart. Ours. It was on Park Street that I realized the two thieves were following us on the other side of the street. Hey, I said to Gaetano. I know. At the corner, he crossed, but toward the thieves. He beckoned them over. They walked up. Maurizio, taking the lead, "Where are you taking those sandwiches every day?" "Not that far," said Gaetano. "You know any little kids that need a job?" Maurizio smoothed back his hair. "Who's hiring?" "The boss." Gaetano jerked his chin toward my cheek and held out my arm so the bruise showed. "And spread the word. He doesn't put up with monkey business." Okay, so now he's making it look like there's a boss involved, even above them, that maybe bruised up Dom. So kind of like the older brother strategy here. Don't mess with this guy. Maurizio smiled meanly. "You have a padrone? I never thought you'd go that way. Of all people." "Hell no," Gaetano yelped. "Boss, not padrone." He moved closer to Maurizio. "Ci tiene a liberte a ricco e nuno sape." Whoever is free is rich, though he doesn't know it. "Who is it? Who's your boss?" Gaetano just looked at him. "Someone from outside 5 Points. We gotta go." "Oh, here, from the boss." Gaetano gave Maurizio 2 sandwiches and something for your little friends. He gave him 4 more. Maurizio stood there with his arms full, gaping. "That's the last time, understand? I'm counting on you to keep those kids in line." We walked off. "You didn't even introduce me," I said. "It wasn't a social call. Anyway, they know your name. You won't get jumped again, and no Scagnizo will come near this cart." Between the sandwiches Gaetano gave away and the ones we ate, Tin Pan Alley and I had only 30 to sell. But they all went, most for full price. At the end of the day, Gaetano and I went back to Signor Esposito's with $6.10. We set aside $2.50 for starting the next day. After paying our room and board, we had only 10 cents left, and we owed Tin Pan Alley his share of the day's profits. But Thursday and Friday went fine. Just the usual annoyances, people who paid less than full price, a man who dropped his sandwich then demanded another for free. In the next month, business grew so fast it was like an eruption of Mount Vesuvio. It felt as though Wall Street had been doing nothing but waiting for our sandwiches. Part of what made it work was that Gaetano was a champion patroller. He spotted Tin Pan Alley's padrone every time and whisked me and the cart away fast. And part of what made it work was that Tin Pan Alley listened, and he told us everything, and we learned. One day, one of the men who had bought a sandwich going into work that morning came back and asked for a second at a reduced price. He offered 15 cents. We settled on 18. He said he'd eaten the first one at his breakfast. That afternoon, I dragged Gaetano with me to Mott Street to talk the Casson grandma into making a potato and fried egg sandwich on a long loaf with rosemary and pepper, especially for us the next morning. We paid her 25 cents. When we picked it up, the bread was jammed full. We figured most people couldn't eat even a quarter of such heavy stuff that early in the morning, so we cut it into 6 pieces to sell for 20 cents each. It was a gamble, but all we had to do was sell 2 of the 6 pieces to come out on top. We wound up selling them for 12 cents, but we sold out. We ordered 2 breakfast sandwiches from Old Lady Casson for the next day. And more after that, and the next week, we added breakfast pastries to the cart. That was Gaetano's idea. For some crazy reason, people would say egg sandwiches were too rich. Then they'd turn right around and buy cannoli stuffed with ricotta. They bought all of it. Perano now sold us sandwiches cheaper, 23 cents each, because we bought so many. After the breakfast shift, Gaetano and I ran back to Park Street to get ready for the lunch crowd, which was much bigger. One noon, in midsummer, a man in a regular top hat and sporting a small, neat beard asked me if any of our sandwiches came without cheese. But this time, I spoke half-decent English when it came to sandwiches. Gaetano was at my side. He understood well enough by then, too, and he muttered to me in Neapolitano that the guy ought to learn how to pick out the cheese. The man wasn't Italian, and I doubt he understood a word of what Gaetano said, but he understood the tone. He went away without waiting for my answer. There was something about him. It wasn't just his way of walking or dressing, or his beard, or that look of being offended on his face. It was all of those things together. I made a guess about him. Any idea? This would be an inference if you can guess what it is about that strikes Dom about this man. The next day I watched for the man. When I saw him come out of a building, I ran over. "What kind of meat you want?" I asked in English. "Beef," he said, "just beef." "Polish?" I asked. He looked alarmed. "Why do you say that?" I'm not Polish. Polish beef, it is the best, I said. He hesitated, then he said, That's true. Come tomorrow, I said. But you got buy 3 sandwiches. That how we make. 3 at a time. So he's speaking English here, that's why it's a little broken. It's a second language here. It wasn't true, but I figured I'd eat the 4th one. I can buy 3, he said. Friends will eat them. When I went back to the cart, Tin Pan Alley whispered to me, There's a Polish butcher on Baxter Street. Surprised, I moved close to him so Gaetano couldn't hear us. How'd you do that? How'd you guess what he wanted? Same way you did, probably. So I learned that Gaetano had been wrong about 5 points. It wasn't only Italians. Just as Chinese were moving into Mott Street, Poles were moving in too. Jews. And Grandinetti had told me 5 points had been Irish before it was Italian. We sold a fair number of kosher sandwiches after that. Only Tin Pan Alley didn't call them kosher, he called them pure beef, and our eyes locked in understanding when he'd hawk them that way. Every time I went to Baxter Street to pick up the beef, I passed doorways with mezuzahs. Even the butcher shop had a mezuzah. My fingers itched to touch them, but I never did. Then I'd run back to Grandinetti's, stopping at the bakery for loaves, and I'd pile the sandwiches high with beef and rings of red onion. Gaetano didn't give me any trouble about it, even though he found out pretty fast where I bought the beef. Business was business. In the late afternoon, we sold produce from Grandinetti's. The Wall Street workers would buy a single carrot, 2 tomatoes, a handful of lettuce leaves. Our customers were happy with the vegetables. When I told Grandinetti, he said Germans and Irish and Swedes and all of them might know how to make money, but they had never known how to eat. Italians, they knew how to eat. He said, That's how we'll change America. Gaetano laughed, but Grandinetti was serious. It was his big dream to teach America how to eat. I love Italian food. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And food is a great reason for cultural diffusion. Cultural diffusion is different cultures coming together. Music, music, food, art. These are the things that when people from different parts of the world mingle with each other, it's shared. And food is a great one. It's a great thing to bring people together. It was summer and everything grew. But we could look ahead and see that we'd better figure out new things to sell if we wanted to have customers in autumn. So we added candied almonds and other sweets. We learned something the hard way. Once we got rained out, we had bought an oilcloth and we kept it in the cart so we could cover everything at the first drop. But this rain lasted all through the lunch hour and all afternoon, and almost no one came out to buy. After that, we scanned the sky before going to Pirano's. Another time, a wheel broke off the front of our cart on the way to Wall Street and half the load fell in the gutter, ruined. So we began checking the cart. We brought leftovers home to Signor Esposito. At first, the widow cooked bad. Her habits were stingy. Her white face wasn't powdered, it was floured. Flour cost less than powder. And her strong perfume covered the fact that she hardly ever washed, to save on water and soap. But once she learned to count on our rent, she bought better food and turned out to be a pretty good cook. She smiled sometimes, and she even started to use an iron to curl her hair when she went to church. The best thing about her was that I asked her never to make pork or horse meat or shellfish, and she didn't say a word about it to Gaetano. I was so grateful I bought her rhinestone clips for her hair. The funny thing was that same day, Gaetano bought her a box of real talcum. I don't know what secret she was keeping for him. By late summer, the cart was too full to keep racing off whenever Gaetano spotted the padrone, and it upset our customers. So we set up across the street, catty-corner to Tin Pan Alley. He hawked for us on his side, and I hawked on the other. Gaetano still patrolled most of the time, but whenever he saw the padrone, all he had to do was signal Tin Pan Alley to play his triangle. Having all those customers made another change for us, a funny one. Because what Gaetano had made up that day, telling Maurizio that our boss needed more kids, turned out to be true. Sometimes the orders came in such a rush that Gaetano had to quit patrolling and Tin Pan Alley had to cross the street, and still the 3 of us couldn't fill them fast enough. We hired kids from 5 Points to help, usually Michel, Nicola, and Roberto. They were brothers about a year apart. They worked fast, but more important, they were honest. It was my job to count up the sums for each transaction, out loud so customers knew they were getting a fair deal. All three of us came up with ideas, but somehow I was in charge. Maybe because Gaetano and Tin Pan Alley really didn't like each other. In any case, I was the boss. We never let on about that, of course. Whenever we'd hire a new kid for the day, I'd say something to Gaetano like, "You think the boss would take this one on?" And Gaetano would answer, "If he can clean up his face and hands good, I bet the boss will say okay." No one messed with us. This boss had gotten a grip on Gaetano, the most independent guy in the neighborhood, so he had to be a real terror. One day, we hired an older boy to help out. He demanded 25 cents for working the lunch shift when the little boys were happy with only 10, but he spoke English and he looked clean, so we did it. The very next day, he appeared on the same block as us with 4 sandwiches in his arms. He sold them for 20 cents each. The day after that, he came with 12 sandwiches. So I got a little competition here now. We lowered our price to 15 cents a sandwich, then 10, then 5. It meant we lost money, so much that we had to pay Senora Esposito in installments. She didn't ask why, she knew the code too. Don't ask. But we could afford to lose money for a while, and the other boy couldn't. He disappeared, and our prices went back up. Gaetano still wouldn't speak English no matter what. Once we stepped out of 5 points, I did the talking. Tin Pan Alley still played his triangle and whistled when we were off restocking the cart. He didn't have to, though. By this point, we put as much as he needed in his cup at the end of the day to make 80 cents. He was a great hawker. He wore a smile all the time and was friendly with the customers. We never worked on Saturday, the Sabbath. The rest of New York, it seemed, worked 6 days a week, but not us. Gaetano didn't complain. He missed his old job of being information man for the neighborhood. So on weekends, he eavesdropped and scouted to his heart's content. Weekends were fun time. That was what he said. Tin Pan Alley didn't complain either because he never complained. I spent Saturdays at the wharves looking at ships. I'd be on one soon enough. On Sundays, well, I never set foot in a church again, even though Gaetano and Signor Esposito scolded me. I lay on my bed with my pillow over my head and let them blabber. When they finally left for church, I'd go out for an adventure. Sometimes I stopped in at Catholic mutual aid societies to snatch a few pastries, and during saint festivals, I walked happily through the crowds. People sold all sorts of crazy things, but Ricardo, a guy who made girls swoon, sold the very craziest thing. He wore a dark suit, but from his pockets, colored ribbons sprouted in profusion. He'd lean toward a woman who would put her nose to his neck, then drop a coin in his hand. At every festa, Ricardo sold sniffs of himself. But mostly, I spent my Sundays walking around the island of Manhattan alone. The air was fresh, and my stomach was full. Had Mama gotten an office job yet? If she had, everyone in my family had a full stomach. That was good. That way, they wouldn't be so sad all the time from missing me. All right. That is chapter 19. Getting close to the end here. I hope you're enjoying. I do enjoy the last 3 chapters that really focus on the expansion of their business and how they're doing that and how they're sort of using their different traits and skills to work together as a budding business. They kind of have, Dom, I think, is the numbers guy. He's kind of the quote unquote boss because he also has some people skills. Gaetano thinks he doesn't have any street smarts, but Gaetano also doesn't like Tin Pan Alley, so Dom is kind of, brings them together. The 3 of them. They've brought on a few other boys to help during the busy hour. They get a little competition in this chapter, but because they lower their price, they're able to kind of outsell the competition to the point where the competition flounders and fails and leaves, and then they can bring their prices back up. So, hope you enjoyed. Let's find out. What do you think? Is Dom heading back to Napoli? Do you think Mama misses him? I think probably. Whether or not she meant to send him alone or not, I'm sure it was hard to send away a child. I think I mentioned before that these types of immigration stories were not uncommon. It was not uncommon to send a child or children maybe on their own in hopes that they would make it. So I'm sure that was a hard thing. All right, keep following along. I hope you enjoyed this chapter 19 of The King of Mulberry Street. Take it easy. Peace.